What if I told you that one of the most powerful states in the Middle East is not being challenged by foreign armies, but by its own people? Yet tonight, Iran is burning from within. Streets filled with anger. Internet cut. Gunfire in the dark. And behind the smoke, a question that refuses to disappear. Is Iran facing a revolution or the beginning of a war? This is not just a story of protests. This is the story of power versus survival, of regime change versus resistance, and of a nation caught between its people and its enemies. Iran today is experiencing one of the most intense waves of public unrest in decades. What began as demonstrations over rising prices, collapsing currency, and everyday hardship has evolved into something far more dangerous for the ruling system. Protesters are no longer only demanding economic relief. They are openly challenging authority itself. Crowds chant against corruption, against repression, against a political order they believe has failed them. In response, the state has reacted with familiar tools: internet blackouts, mass arrests, and security forces flooding city streets. But this time feels different. The protests are wider. The slogans are bolder. And the fear that once kept dissent underground is cracking. For many Iranians, the struggle is no longer about food or fuel. It is about dignity, identity, and who truly owns the future of the country. To understand the unrest, you must understand the pressure cooker Iran has become. Years of sanctions have suffocated the economy. The national currency has collapsed. Inflation devours wages. Youth unemployment remains crushing. Electricity shortages, water crises, factories closing. Daily life has become a battle for survival. But economic pain alone does not cause revolutions. What fuels today's anger is the belief that the system is unresponsive, rigid, and disconnected from the people it governs. A younger generation, urban, educated, digitally connected, feels locked out of political participation and global opportunity. In their eyes, the Islamic Republic no longer represents resistance or independence, but stagnation and control. The state insists the unrest is the work of foreign enemies. Protesters insist it is the voice of a nation that can no longer breathe. To the outside world, Iran's crisis may look internal, but for Tehran's leadership, it is inseparable from a much older conflict. The war between Iran and the United States is not fought with armies. It is fought with sanctions, covert operations, cyber attacks, propaganda, and political pressure. Since the 1979 Iranian Revolution overthrew a U.S.-backed monarchy, Washington and Tehran have been locked in a struggle for influence. The United States views Iran as a destabilizing power in the Middle East, supporting militias, challenging American allies, and resisting Western dominance. Iran views the United States as an imperial force determined to control its region and erase its independence. Over the decades, this conflict has taken many forms. Economic warfare through sanctions, intelligence operations and assassinations, cyber attacks on nuclear facilities, proxy wars in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. For Iran's leadership, every protest carries a haunting memory that foreign powers once helped shape their country's fate and could try again. The phrase, regime change, has followed Iran for decades. In Washington, some policymakers openly argue that stability in the Middle East is impossible while Iran's current system remains in power. Others deny seeking regime change, insisting their goal is only behavior change. But in Tehran, the distinction means little. From the Iranian state's perspective, sanctions are not economic pressure but political warfare. Support for opposition media is not free speech but psychological operations. Calls for human rights are not moral concerns but strategic tools. And history feeds this paranoia. Iran remembers 1953 when a U.S.-backed operation helped overthrow its elected prime minister. It remembers decades of Western support for its enemies. It remembers isolation, war, and containment. So when protests erupt today, the leadership sees not just domestic unrest, but a battlefield of influence. Are the protests organic? Yes. If the United States is Iran's long-term adversary, Israel is its immediate rival. For Israel, Iran's nuclear ambitions represent an existential threat. For Iran, Israel represents Western military dominance planted in the heart of the Middle East. The two countries are already at war, just not openly. Cyber attacks against infrastructure. Strikes on Iranian-linked forces in Syria. Intelligence operations and sabotage. Shadow conflicts through proxies. Israel has made its red line clear. A nuclear-armed Iran will not be tolerated. And many analysts believe that if diplomacy collapses completely, Israel is prepared to strike Iran's nuclear facilities alone if necessary, or with American backing. Which brings us to the most dangerous question of all. As Iran faces unrest at home, pressure from abroad is increasing. Military exercises in the region, warships repositioned, intelligence leaks about contingency plans. Diplomatic warnings sharpened. For Washington and Tel Aviv, Iran's internal instability presents a strategic dilemma. Strike now, when the regime is weakened? Or avoid war that could unite the population behind the government? History offers a brutal lesson. External attacks often strengthen the very regimes they aim to destroy. If Israel or the United States launches a direct attack, Iran will retaliate. Regional allies and militias will respond. Energy routes could be disrupted. The Middle East could ignite into a multi-front conflict. But if no action is taken and Iran continues advancing its nuclear capabilities, the balance of power in the region could permanently shift. This is not a question of if tensions will rise. It is a question of when they will break. While governments calculate strategy, it is ordinary Iranians who pay the price. Every sanction tightens daily life. Every blackout cuts families off from the world. Every clash in the streets deepens fear. The protester and the soldier often share the same background, same neighborhoods, same economic hardship, same uncertain future. One demands change. The other enforces order. And both are trapped inside a system shaped by decades of confrontation with the outside world. This is the tragedy of modern Iran, a nation rich in history, culture, and human potential, but constantly forced to choose between resistance and reform, security and freedom, survival and transformation. Three possible futures now hang over Iran. The state crushes protests through force and control. The unrest fades. But the underlying crisis deepens, waiting for the next explosion. Reforms emerge from within the system. Power shifts gradually. But this path requires trust and time that Iran may not have. A strike by Israel or the United States changes everything overnight. Nationalism replaces protest. the region is destabilized, and Iran's internal struggle becomes a global conflict. None of these paths are easy, none are without cost. Tonight, Iran stands at a crossroads. On one side, a population demanding dignity, opportunity, and a voice in their own future. On the other, a state shaped by decades of siege, convinced that surrender means annihilation. Above them, global powers watching, calculating, waiting. This is not just about Iran. It is about the future of the Middle East, about whether change will come from within or be forced from without. Because when a nation begins to fracture from the inside and enemies gather at the gates, history does not whisper. It explodes.